Canadian Family Health Counselling provides education and counseling services across Canada and beyond. Our holistic approach, called neural network therapy, uses practical tools to boost mood, reduce anxiety, manage anger, break unwanted habits, and develop strong, healthy relationships. Sit back and relax while Clinical Director and Founder Kim Sargent shares her insights and expertise on why emotional health matters.
Hello and welcome back to Emotional Health Matters. My name is Kim Sargent. I'm the Clinical Director of Canadian Family Health Counselling and founder of Neural Network Therapy. And I'm here with my co-host, Hanna Koposhynska, and Laura Nugent of Laura Nugent Wellness. I'm very excited to have this conversation at long last. I think we've been a year in the making trying to put this thing together. So Laura, at one time, and I'll of course hand the mic over to you because you have the really interesting things to say, but Laura at one time started a very successful yoga practice just down the street from the counseling practice. And I made the joke that I could zip line from my third floor into the yoga studio and find my way to my mat. And yoga became a really important part of my life. I'd always been doing yoga, but yoga became an incredibly critical part of my life following the car accident and brain injury, at which time I pleaded with Laura to teach me all she knew so that I could get my nervous system back on the rails again. And yoga is one fantastic way of doing that. So we will talk a little bit about yoga, but also, and more excitedly, I'd like to talk about your adventures in Costa Rica. Yeah, tell me all about, I guess maybe if you don't mind first sharing a bit about what your background was and how it led you to get into your original yoga studio.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It was more forced than anything. A good forced. So I was a high-level athlete playing for university, Queen's University rugby. Nothing like yoga. And then I played for an Ontario team and was longlisted, which was the goal because my coach on the Ontario team was a really high-level, amazing Canadian coach and had played for many years. She was the coach of the Western Mustangs as well. Anyway, so she like really instilled that belief, like you could play for Canada, like you can do this. And I was going, really? So it became a goal of mine. I achieved it really quickly by that fall. So that was during the summer. I played with her. By that fall, I'd been longlisted, which means you go to our barbarian game. And it just happened to be in Kingston, where Queens is, where I was living. And you play on the barbarian side, which is basically you, as this little minion, go against the Canadian team and they see how you do. How many beatings can you take? So I was talking to the coaches and they're like, oh, your name came up because it's very social in rugby. We did a boat cruise. Like we hosted them as a club team. We hosted the Canadian team and the coaches. And they're like, oh, your name came up. Like you had a really good highlight video. I was like, thank you. I made that myself. So then I was like, yes, I'm in. I want to play on the barbarian side. I have a small issue. My rib, it doesn't stay in. It just keeps popping out. I can't breathe that well. I got pain radiating down my back and pretty intense low back issues as well. Hurts getting out of bed, but if I could just wear the jersey and so like, right, because, and I was just so passionate. I would be like, you know, I'd get my rib popped back in by a chiropractor and be like, okay, this is healing 2-3 days. I can go back in. And he'd be like, maybe. So I ended up tearing cartilage because I kept doing that 4 or 5 times. I don't know. Tearing cartilage in your chest is hell, right? It's right over your heart, but not a lot of blood flow gets there, surprisingly. So it took a year to heal. And one of my teammates said, within that year where I decided, okay, I have to take a year off. She's like, why don't you come to hot yoga? I was like, yeah, stupid stretching. What's that going to do? Like, I had also bought a bike because I thought I'll cycle across Canada. If I can't play for Canada, I'll cycle across Canada. Do you know how much it hurt to like bend over and ride a bike with torn cartilage? It hurt to breathe. Like it hurt to breathe. So I'm breathing heavily like this. It was a bad idea. So I went and in the first class, the teacher said, I remember this line so clearly, only push yourself as far as your body will allow, not to the point of injury. And I was like, as a contact sport, high level athlete, you're like, what? You break bones for a ball. Like, so, and I literally knew in that second, because it just started to feel good. It was so hard. Hot yoga, especially Bikram, it's like militaristic, but I needed that coming from a sports background. I really needed that, like 36 poses, repeated twice, push, push, push. And in the heat, oh my God, it was brutal. But I just knew, I was like, I'm giving up rugby. So I told no one. And I had that year off, and then I did one more year at Queens. I played varsity one more year, but I lost the drive to play nationally or to go further. I'm like, that was fun. So like, I'm gonna go to yoga. And then I traveled to New Zealand just because I had no idea what I was gonna do. I did a fine art degree, which I love. Like, I decided long ago, I was like, I'm going to stick to passions and make it work. But at Queens is really good. They did a course on how to be an artist, the business of being an artist. I was like, that sounds like a big failure. It sounds just like all the odds are against you. Maybe you'll be the 0.5% that make it. And I'm like, oh. So I traveled to New Zealand just to get away. I had a good friend there, and did that for 13 months, and just happened to walk into a studio that was so ideal. It was an American couple that had opened it. It was called still is called Hot Yoga New Zealand. And it was a deviation of Bikram. It was called the Barkin series. So it wasn't the same 36 postures, which I'd gotten sick of. There were sun salutations, the sequence changed. It was in the hot room, which I needed, especially for my healing. And yeah, I did my teacher training. They asked, as a 5-month training, they asked in month 2 if I would open a studio for them in New Zealand. And I'm like, I just cried. I was 25 at the time. My mother will kill me. Because I was in that phase of like, what do I do with my life? What the heck? So I finally, by the end of the training, said, thank you so much. This is such an honor. And I knew it would have been successful, but I decided I wanted to go back home, which was just outside Peterborough on Lake Chamong. I had no home, really, right? I stayed at the family cottage, and just decided, oh, maybe I'll open in Ottawa or Vancouver. I was like, wait a minute, it's saturated with hot yoga or yoga there. And then I just got researching Peterborough. I'm like, okay, they're really fit here. It's a good community. I didn't grow up in Peterborough. I was born there and always had family there in the cottage. So, I wasn't super well known in the community at that time. But when I started to research, I taught for a year there, did the business plan, and a lot of people wanted hot yoga. So that's what I did. I opened a studio at 26 years old. Yeah.
Amazing.
You were just 26 when you started at the downstairs location, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just a little spring chicken.
Just a little baby. That's amazing. I remember coming actually when you had opened that first one. I didn't really, of course, get very committed to yoga again until I came to the studio when it had moved upstairs. But that's such an interesting story. I knew you had these injuries, and I knew the rugby part. When I was talking to Hanna about doing this interview, she was getting really excited, going, oh, but yeah, Hannah's got a sports background as well.
I was going to say, it's funny because my first hot yoga experience was also Bikram. And I was like, oh, this will be great, easy. I just finished my varsity sport career, whatever. And then I did it. I was like, oh, wow, this was basically an hour of slow motion burpees. It felt amazing, but I was like, that was incredibly hard.
Yeah, it's even yoga is harder for athletes because we're so tight and we're so used to similar motion. Like, we're fit, but you do the same motion and you get very tight, especially if you're running, like your back, your legs. So it's so good to diversify all the time, which is hard, but I do always do justice now.
Yeah, I definitely regretted. My coaches absolutely always told me you have to stretch before and after, but when you're in your early 20s, you don't really feel it. You can just run on the field, have a 10-minute warm up and ready to go. And then you hit that age where you're like, oh, I need an hour and a half warm up now. So it definitely helps when you've been having that or building that foundation of stretching, because it doesn't just hit you like a wall like it did me. And I'm sure so many other people that go through the varsity career and then retire.
Yeah.
Cool.
Makes perfect sense. Well, so in that first passion, before we get on to the next part of what you did, tell me about the yoga part of life. What were the teachings? What can you share with the community here? Everybody that is listening, for the most part, I assume, to this Emotional Health Matters podcast is here because they're looking to grow, their skills, their knowledge base about how to be able to care for themselves in new ways. We have a lot of people that are here proactively looking at how they can enrich their lives. Certainly there are people who have serious mental health issues that they're looking to treat perhaps in a variety of ways, not just with maybe taking some medication I think it's just a full range. So what can you share with us from all the wisdom that you had during those years?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we can take away, whether it's yoga or not, if we're not physically moving our bodies, emotions can get so stuck. Right? So what I learned from yoga and from qigong, so I'm a medical qigong instructor as well. Eastern philosophy looks at the whole body, from physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and they want to move from there. So there's energy lines in our body called meridians. Just think of it as streams or rivers running to and from the organs out to your limbs and back in. It's circulating this energy, which we want to say in let's say a Western way. You're like, I don't believe all that, which I initially was like, chakras, this is ridiculous. Like in my whole first teacher training, I'm like, what are you talking about? But we say these things like, I'm low energy today. Oh, I feel energy. My body just feels alive, right? When you're dancing or something, or there's times like, oh, energy, like, we use that language as well. We just don't necessarily know the metaphysics behind it. So if we just commit to moving our bodies, whether that's walking, initially it depends on your physical abilities. It depends on your ability maybe to get out of bed if you have if you're depressed, right? If we just move our bodies just to get a little bit better, right? So that would be my biggest suggestion is, okay, maybe it's not yoga, and maybe I'm not going to go dive into a 90-minute hot yoga series. I do not suggest that initially, but a high-level athlete, like an athlete who really likes, I call it a fiery person, someone who's like always go, 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 they initially need that type of yoga to then eventually maybe end up in a yin class, but maybe not ever. It's so interesting as an instructor because I owned that studio for 10 years, right? And saw my evolution to where now I'm like, let's just lay in child's pose. Like, I was like, sun salutation? No. Especially now that I'm very pregnant and have 2 small babies, I use yoga for calm, and then I might swim or walk. I don't run. I'm not a runner anymore by any means. So the biggest thing I would say to people is move your body and find a community, because community is one of the biggest things we can do for emotional health. One of the absolute biggest. So that's why COVID was like, all the lockdowns were brutal for so many. I still feel like we're dealing with that aftermath. Some are scared to even, like, I know they still run virtual classes at the studio because some are hesitant to be in a space, right? That really affected a lot of people's mental health. So to find a community, whether it is online, which is completely fine, or whether you need to be around people that can help support you, is so key too.
That's great advice for sure. I'll share this one story though that I just came to mind as you were talking, because I remember you were encouraging me at the beginning to go and try out a variety of classes. And I had done yoga. I was a Sean Korn yoga vinyasa person at the beginning. So that fiery personality, move. And it was a workout. I call it now actually my sport yoga. And that was just the way I looked at it. I wasn't doing a lot of the Zen part of anything there. But I remember going into restorative yoga and sitting there, and it was an hour-long class, and it was in your smaller studio, and somebody else was teaching the class. It wasn't you that day. But anyway, and you just said, go ahead and lay down. And I laid down on the mat, and then the pillows were all just laid out to do the whole heart opener, And so I was there with maybe 4 other people to my left, windows actually all around me. And I'm laying there, and within 2 minutes, I'm like, I've gotta get out of here. Like, oh my God. I had this massive, what I didn't realize at the time was an anxiety attack on this thing, not recognize. And I finally had to open my eyes and go, Kim, I don't think any of those people are terribly threatening. There was just this, whoa, what just happened? But it was the same. You might as well have told me that somebody in that room had a gun. Like, it was the same, biochemistry that shot off in my body that was clearly, I think, me hanging on to all of this stuff and having this whole fear factor that just needed to be released in that great heart opener, which is now my favorite pose. For a while there, I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't care. I'm not doing it. Like, I just was completely anti heart opening poses for a little bit until I knew, oh, I see what's going on here. So for me, also being in this field and every day working with people, climbing up into my head and working in this very intellectual capacity, yoga was such a great way, any body stuff, but yoga was such a great way for me to get out of my head and just let my body do the work it needed to do without me getting in the way of it. It was really helpful for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you never fully know as a teacher, nor are we supposed to. Like, we're not the psychologists, the therapists, right? That's actually how I got into life coaching, because I was like, okay, people need this from me and I am helping them. So let me create this second sector, right, of what I do. But you never fully know what they're going through, but you learn as an instructor to hold space and to say the words of, to say it's okay if emotion's coming up. It's okay. And I really started to tap into, with women specifically, because it's a lot of women in yoga, it's okay if you're in Savasana and you're pissed off. Because we have I would say we have so much anger, but women, we can. It's just how it's in our DNA almost. Like, we can reserve ourselves more in whatever situation because we're trying to make things okay or nurture. And you might just be pissed off, and we're not necessarily going to go get in a bar fight, right? Or just get it out that way. And there is martial arts too, which some women take on, which is awesome. But it can be challenging to get out that specific emotion and to feel okay with it, to get it out, which was my rugby side, right? It's like, okay, you used to beat people up a little bit, yeah. And I remember I did, because it was very, we're talking about mental health. I was definitely, I don't know if we use the word depressed, very, very low when I could not play from that injury, because my identity had just been, my dreams had just been, whoop. I was like, oh, okay. But I became very good friends with my yoga instructor. I would have been, I don't know, 23 or something at the time. And we talked so much about metaphysics. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like physics with like spirit in it. This is great. It's all making sense to me. And I remember telling her, I'm like, I'm literally being pulled. Like, I want to go back to my rugby, feel like a Viking. Like, yes, I can do this. But I'm literally feel like I'm being pulled into yoga. Like, she's like, you'd be a really good teacher. I'm like, I don't think so. And she was right. So, yeah.
When was the moment that you went like, yoga is it? Like, this is what I'm meant to like teach and share with the world. Was there a defining moment?
I think when I walked into, well, my dad said before I went to New Zealand, because it wasn't really in my radar. Like, my yoga teacher had said that, and I was like, yeah, maybe. Just in that confusing stage of what the heck do I do with my life? Like, I knew I wanted a family eventually too. So I'd even thought, because I went to Guelph for half a semester because I wanted to be an architect. And there I could build my portfolio and then apply for 2 years to go to Dalhousie. But I actually left there and went to Queens. So I'm like, I don't know. This is a lot. I'm planning everything. I'm just going to switch and do what I love, which was fine art and rugby, and I'll figure it out. So that's when I decided do what feels good and make it work from there. And I would have been 19 at that point. And then I think, yeah, my dad said, why don't you do your yoga teacher training in New Zealand? I was like, so I looked up some, and I didn't really, I was like, yeah, maybe. And it was literally in the last 4 months of my trip that I found this teacher training. I'd extend my visa by a month. And I walked in, I just felt it. I'm like, yes. And I still call Lou and Claire, the couple. They no longer own it. They're in Arizona now. I call them my yoga parents. They helped me set up the studio in Peterborough. Like, they're just, I haven't seen them for years, but we still talk, right? So you find this family that you absolutely love and adore. But I'm almost on the other end of that, where it's like yoga's a part of me, but it's not everything I do by any means. Like, I'm on the end where I'm like, teach a class, I'm like, I'm okay. Like, we used to live really close to the beach, and they offered free classes, which I would go to. It was like this older gentleman who I loved, and just a couple teachers would rotate. We had quite a big group going, and I'd go when I could. They're like, "Oh, you could come and teach." I'm like, "No." I'm here to. So I'm in that phase because I have so much energy to put into this little family. So I have a 5-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, 35 weeks pregnant, due, what's that, next month. And yeah, it's a lot of energy to be that nurturer, the giver, the teacher, and then to do it all for your family. And I was like, I need to step back and just use it for me right now.
And I think that happens with a lot of careers, right? And once you've said and done something enough times in a row, and you could do it sleeping, we know now with neuroscience, your brain is saying, hey, there's a whole lot more neurons that you're not making use of. So we're just going to take them down. And so those little telephones in your brain come down, and suddenly you feel lower energy. You just feel like you're just going and hitting repeat again and again and doing these things. So I think we're supposed to maintain a creative edge of some sort. And when we've mastered something, we've come to that end, I think it's our time to go, and what else? And so you're doing the what else part, right? I mean, it's, transitioning. I've learned to catch myself a little earlier now. And so I start into a project and I realized, nope, this is not lighting me on fire the way it was. And so I put it down and I pick up something that does light me on fire, and it feels great. So yeah, so tell me about the decision to move your entire family to Costa Rica and start your life there.
COVID lockdowns were a huge factor, right? Because me and my husband, he had a gym in Pickering, Ontario. So we both were forced to take it all online. And it was almost a year, essentially. Like, it opened a little bit and closed, and opened a little bit and closed, which was like so frustrating as a owner and for the clients. So you just eventually keep losing a little bit more, people losing. You're like, oh my gosh, but still paying all your bills. We're just like, if we can do it online, like, it wasn't like our businesses were tanking by any means. But we're like, if we can do this online here, we can do this anywhere. And my husband, his parents are Jamaican. He's first generation Canadian. He always wanted to retire somewhere hot and nice. And he'd said that over the years. He said it every winter, essentially. He's, oh, we need to move. Right? I was like, yeah, we'll get there. But then he's a research master, and he just really started researching where, because he decided, I'm done. And he brought the idea up to me, and I'm like, yeah. But then by the third or fourth open and then shut down, I was like, we're going. And he said Costa Rica has good healthcare, which it really does, which we're learning a lot with this baby on the way, and good schools. They have public and private options in healthcare and in schools, and pretty affordable. It's definitely rising because so many North Americans have done the same thing as us. But yeah, it took time. It took some emotional tolls on people close to us, and then us in return trying to deal with getting out of Canada. But in the end, it's not like it's been, oh, this is the paradise. People are like, you're living the dream. Yes, there's definitely some amazing adventures, but we have 2 young kids who we moved around essentially for the first year, and eventually just ended up staying somewhere 10 months because we wanted to get them in school, set some roots down. And that was in the coast in Coco, Place del Coco. And it was just in the summertime, which is now, summer is February to essentially April. It went from hot to hotter. Like, hot yoga hot. And I'm like, no. Especially my second pregnancy, I was like, I hate heat now. Like, I'm done. We decided to move inland, which is where we are now. So we're building in the mountains. We discovered we're more mountain people than beach people because the coast can just be, they're beautiful, but they can just get so hot. So you end up spending hours during the day just inside in air conditioning. There's some people who love it. Like, there was a lot of Canadians there who just bask it up, but no, I was a grumpy human, so no.
Okay, and then of course, I think even Brian has changed tunes from, so he was originally going one direction and he's made he's into building, is that right? So something, okay.
That was,
How did that happen?
I would say he had a health and wellness business. He had the fitness studio, he had his life coaching practice, he had his personal training practice, he wrote books, but he's a businessman at heart. Like, we did a veggie burger business one summer. We would go to festivals and it would just work because I can cook and he can sell. And it was really successful, but I'm like, this is way too much work. Like, cooking burgers all the time. And he also got into jewelry at one point. Yeah, like the stone, like the yoga crystals and stones, mala beads and stuff. He got into making that and was like, he like sold them for $300. What's happening here? So he's definitely a businessman at heart. Well, how this one evolved is he looked at so much real estate before we came here. Was like a little bit obsessed with. He's like, let's look at houses and real estate. And I'm like, I was like we don't know where we're gonna stay. So I just found it pointless. So I'm like, let's look when we know where we're gonna be. But he'd learned so much just from looking at homes and all the real estate. When we got here, he'd already connected with builders to talk about our home. So that's when we met Bernal Ostroga, who is essentially a fourth generation builder in his family. And he was working with his father at the time. That would have been maybe October 2021 when we met him. And by January, the following January 2022, they essentially started business together because Brian saw how successful Bernal was. He had great build, really relatable, great guy, but he had no website, which is common in Costa Rica. No website, no business card, no advertising. And Brian's like, I can bump this up for you, man. Like, we could really do amazing things. And then Brian started connecting with, like people from Caldwell and Banker and brokers, especially more in Cocoa, because so many people build on the coast. And it just took off. Like, they're doing big developments now. He's in a meeting today about, it's 40 plots, which Bernal always wanted to do, but he was so busy doing everything. Like, even though he's working with his dad, like, he was connecting with the clients. He was the architect. He was the builder, right? This man never stopped. And his health was even declining from it. So Brian took away, he's like, I'll deal with the clients, I'll do the sales, I'll do the advertising. So it's actually this really wonderful business partnership that is thriving very quickly. Like, it's almost like it was just meant to be, because I'm like, how does someone even do that? So yeah.
That's great. Well, I did see online, and obviously we'll share your details at the end, but
Yeah.
the new build, and that looks awfully exciting. It looks like, quite the dream house you're building. So that's,
Yes.
Is this, I assume this is for this builder?
Yes. They're, so Fuga Home Designs is their company, and it's like a chalet. It looks like almost a ski chalet, but there's no snow. It is in the mountains. There's a volcano off in the distance. And yeah, we're very excited. I'm so excited not to live in condos anymore. That's what we've done since we've been here.
That makes sense. But so I guess the last thing is, I'd love to hear tell me about Laura Nugent Wellness. What are you doing with it? What pieces have you put together from all your adventures to make some sense out of this work that you're doing? And and how can we find you?
Yeah, so it is pretty simple. LauraNugentWellness.com is the website. And then Laura Nugent Wellness on Instagram and Facebook is where I'm most active. I've started Pinterest. Don't really get it yet, but it's there. So essentially what I've done is, because I've had to, of course, figure out how do I be a mom and there for the children? But then I think a lot of mothers struggle with this, is like, how do I do it all, right? And still run a business, because I love business. I really do. And I really like helping people. But to have a facility like the yoga studio I did have, traveling 40 minutes in and out and managing lots and lots of people, wasn't becoming realistic anymore. So I'm creating online courses, and I created one for yoga instructors. So it's for new and aspiring instructors, and I called it How to Teach Like a Yoga Pro. And just broke down all the tips from all the knowledge I have on how to start, how to market yourself, even about sequencing, because I find a lot of yoga instructors will do their training course and either just never teach or dabble in it, but perhaps want more. So I put this together, 3 20-minute videos that they could do as an online course. And then right now I'm running a Rise Up group coaching session, which is live, but I'm going to put into an automated course, which is essentially about letting go of your fears. Because I launched in January, of course, now when people have all their resolutions. And then I tell them resolutions don't work, because one of the things, because I think we have to let go of a lot of the things we're hanging on to. First, how do you let go? This is a question I ask them, like, how do you let go? And that's a lot with the physical movement, with meditation, with all these different health and wellness things we do, feeling and eating the right things. Then I move them into talking about the 5 elements, the Chinese 5 elements from QiGong, like the stages of your life and where you are, and what are appropriate goals and things you should be doing. You're like, I want to be a rock star, and you're like 57, like you're going to actually have too much fire and burn out and die. So it was not an example, but it's a very extreme one. And then we just move into heart-centered meditation. Like how you said, Kim, I was on the mat. I didn't know I had all of that stuff in me. And this really nice meditation where you just breathe into your heart. With each inhale, with each exhale, you see the energy expand around your heart. And that's how you figure out, well, what do I really want? What are my goals? As opposed to what are the goals maybe I think I should have at this age, or maybe pressures from society or family members, right? And then finally we go into a 90-day plan on how to make that happen in baby steps, I would say, like achievable daily steps of how to get there. Because it's not, I never guarantee people that they're going to get where they want to be in one yoga class or one coaching session. It's something that you have to change your lifestyle. But incremental steps work best. If you just try and do it hard and fast, that's usually when we fail. That's kind of the resolution model. So that is the main focus right now. I'm not doing any more one-on-one mentoring just because of baby arriving. And yeah, online courses on how to be a better you.
That's amazing. I love that you've taken all of that and put it into something, because your story is fantastic. And I think it lands with a lot of people in different ways, I'm sure. Hanna, do you have any questions? I know you've got so much. I can see you just smiling over there with all of this sports stuff with your background. But so yeah, are there any questions that you've got?
Yeah. So do you have any advice for anyone who's wanting to start out but isn't sure where, especially around, I would say, like consistency? I feel like that's something that people struggle with so much. You like do it once, you feel great, but then it's hard to get it rolling. So do you have any tips around how to work at that?
You have to schedule it in, is the step one. And then you just have to, if you're going to a physical space, like a therapist or a yoga studio, then you just have to get through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally it. And then once you're there, like I always notice that from yoga, like once you're there, you never regret it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's
so it's all, you always feel like schedule it in, and it's just as important as your job. Literally, like it's just as important as your job. And it's challenging at first, but then you get into this pattern, you start liking it, and ideally you stay with it, but not always the case. Sometimes it takes a few goes at it. Yeah.
I remember actually walking into your studio when you were in Peterborough, and that would be it. I would just say, you just need to go in and do 5 minutes of yoga, or you can just go and lay on that mat in that room for the next hour. You don't have to actually do a single pose. Just go and do that. And of course, never would I ever go and just lay on the, I might take a few breaks now and again. And so for sure, I find that with online, unfortunately, it's so easy to go in there, do a little bit of something, and then go, well, that's kind of enough. I certainly don't push myself as hard as I would getting into the physical space and doing it, showing up for it. So I do think that there's something to be said. There's also energy there, right? There's other people that are talking and interacting, and there's a vibe, especially in a place like a yoga studio. But I think anywhere, I walk into the YMCA and I smell the chlorine and I go right back to this great rush of childhood and doing all the great swimming lessons and whatever other fun things that happened. And there's just a buzz of human energy that I just think that helps, that becomes part of the little bite you're going to take of what's happening out there in the world. So I think that's helpful too. I don't think we're supposed to do everything just online, but it's great that there's an alternative for it, for sure. And I do commit. Yeah, I found that it's helped to commit to even saying, if I do a 20-minute something, maybe it's not an hour, but if it's 20 minutes, then I end up feeling great. And I'm just going to add one last piece to that. The other thing I did actually on my yoga mat is every single time I would get there and I'd be laying on my mat in that first little bit going, okay, I'm here. And I'm so proud of you for being here. I'm so proud of you for being here. And it was like this little self pat on the back just to go, you just did a good job. You don't have to worry about anything else now. And that was it. Like Laura said, once you're in the door, the work is over. You're kind of like, oh. And of course,
someone else will tell you exactly what to do. That's what about fitness classes and, about going to the Y. Like someone is literally telling you what to do, which is so nice. Because oftentimes I just want someone in my day-to-day life like, Laura, make the snack now. Laura, your child is crying. Like, Laura. Right? Wouldn't that be nice if we just had this narrator throughout our life? And I think it gives us a mental break too. So showing up is key. And the community, like you said, like the human energy is priceless. I think at this stage in my life, it's like I do more online because I have little ones running around. But it's shorter. I noticed. So that's why I do like, okay, here's 3 20-minute online sessions. You have to break it down. And I personally do a course on how to win the toddler phase, which is all about toddler craziness. And they literally just will do 5-minute videos or less. So you can take these chunks of lessons like, okay, I'll apply that. Okay, good. Which is so beneficial. So yeah, I think both have their value for sure.
That's great. Any other questions, Hannah?
You did a great job answering a lot of them. Let's end with this one. What's been your favorite experience or adventure that your wellness journey has taken you on so far?
Well, I just opened the first space we spoke to, the first yoga studio, and was that winter? It was in the first year. I came to Costa Rica and did a training, a power vinyasa training. And I did so many, like they have all these, actually pretty close to where I am now, but they like Mayan belly massage and all these healing practices. And I was just able to dive into it because I had set up the studio. I had some teachers who could take care of it for me. And I got away for, I don't know what it was, 8 days or so. I really cherish that experience, which is why I was pulled to Costa Rica as well. Now, not everything is a retreat in Costa Rica. We are learning the real life behind it all. It's not bad, but it's different. There's language barrier. There's different cultural differences, even though they might be subtle. You're like, why would they do that? And it's just so when like they come to Canada and say like, what is wrong with you? So yeah, I would say that was definitely a huge highlight. And then the teacher trainings, you just get to immerse yourself in upgrading yourself, being around like-minded people. And it's just wonderful, right? Mm-hmm. I crave a bit of that now for sure. I'm going to see if I can find a mommy baby retreat just for me and the new babe. And I can just go bond with this one and ignore all other responsibilities.
And sorry, what do you do, Laura? You said in the next month, is that right?
Yeah, end of February. So between February 22nd, I guess March 1st could be. My last 2 were born at exactly 40 weeks and 3 days. So we'll see if I'm consistent. Yeah.
Scheduling it in. They
Right?
know. They know when it's time.
Found out yesterday, baby's off them. Baby's always been good. Mom's crazy, but baby's good. Head down, probably about 6 pounds already. So I think I'll have a 9-pounder, but my last one was 8, 9. But honestly, it was easier because it was the second birth. And he said to me, he's like, oh, it's a big baby. And I was like, wait a second. Costa Ricans are smaller than us North Americans, and I'm already tall in North America. I was like, is it Tika? Which, Costa Rican women are called Tikas. I was like, is it Tika big? Or he's like, well, yes. And they typically would do a C-section if the baby's over 8 pounds. I was like, no, just write down in your birth plan, you got this. Because he's not necessarily the doctor I'll have. We decided to go through the public system. He's not necessarily the doctor I'll have. So I'm like, okay, interesting.
Wow, well, that's amazing. And then I guess yeah, whole new life. As I said to you in our email exchange, getting this lined up, you and Brian are going to be outnumbered here very shortly. So when you had just the 2, I get it, but the 3rd, so this will be a whole new world.
Yeah. I said the other day, if you don't talk about this so much, like excited. I literally have 2 onesies. That's all I bought so far. I was like, I'm just more concerned. There's another one coming. But there is lots of caretakers everywhere around us. I literally just dropped the kids off before we started in a building. We're in there's a bunch of condo buildings around us. We'll be okay. We'll be okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I really appreciate it. Hannah, thanks for the good questions there. You've got always some interesting things to add to the mix. And it's lauranugentwellness.com. They can find you, and certainly reach out if you have any questions for Laura, or of course, connect with her directly. Until next time.
Gracias.
If you like what you've heard on today's podcast and want to learn more about our counseling and education services, visit our website at canadianfamilyhealth.ca, because health and happiness begin with you.